Hello and welcome to the channel, which I think I'm going to call Jurassic Garage. The reason for that is I'm well into my 90s cars. I guess they could be considered to be dinosaurs these days. They're all old-fashioned and they're dying out, and you just don't tend to see them anymore. So a little bit about me. I'm Jack, I'm 26 years old and I'm from Cheshire in England. I'm really into my 90s cars, especially Japanese stuff, but not only Japanese stuff. The channel name, I was going to go a bit more Japanese, but I thought I'd stick with something a bit more generic because I do want to try non-Japanese stuff at some point. So my story is, my first word was apparently car. I was always car obsessed as a kid. Cars, diggers, tractors, trucks, anything like that. Not one car in particular until I was about 4 or 5 and I got a Jeremy Clarkson DVD for Christmas on my birthday. And that had a test of an Evo 6 and an Impreza 22B. And from then on, I was full-on Subaru obsessed as a kid. I had all the t-shirts, hats, all that malarkey. And that led me on to watching WRC around the year 2000, I think, because that was the last year of the two-door Impreza, which Richard Burns was driving. My first gaming experience was this, Colin McRae Rally 2. Spent a lot of time on that as a kid. I wasn't very good at it. In fact, I had a go of it last night for the first time in probably 15 years or more, and I'm still not very good at it. It's pretty hard, to be fair. So a year or two later, my dad brought me here, which is Alton Park, where I'm parked now, to watch the British Touring Car Championship. And I can date it as 2001 because I remember seeing Tiffany Dell's name in the back window of his production series Accord and thinking, oh my god, that's Tiffany Dell off the telly. And I've just googled it, and 2001 was the only year that he drove that. So it has to be 2001. But unfortunately, just after Super Touring ended, which was just the best era of motorsport ever for me. Unfortunately, I was a bit too young to A, know it existed, and B, appreciate it while it was actually happening. So then, around that sort of time, this came out. I spent so many hours on this as a kid. It's just full of weird, obscure Japanese cars, and I think that really sort of set me off getting into the Japanese stuff because it was all so weird and cool and just not anything that I'd ever really seen before. And then obviously you've got stuff like Gran Turismo 4 and then Need for Speed Underground 2, The Fast and the Furious. That all contributed. I think that's all got a lot to answer for with regard to what I'm into. So I got a lot more into my Japanese stuff through, Gran Turismo and Need for Speed, stuff like that. So then towards the late 2000s, I wanted to do a bit of motorsport myself. So me and my dad went to watch a bit of Grass Track, or Autograss to give it its proper name. And then I think in 2007 or 2008, we got a Mini and we started racing that, me and my dad. I was in juniors and my dad was in class 1, and I'll put some images up now. That taught me obviously how to drive, way before I was 17, and I could handle it reasonably well, managing understeer, lift off oversteer when it was wet. Obviously it was a loose surface as well, so the speeds are low, but you're still having a hell of a lot of fun. And I'd love to try that again at some point as well, probably with a Yaris or a Micra. It's one of the cheapest ways into motorsport, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. 2011, I was 16, not far off 17, so I wanted to sort of get my first car. Ended up getting the first thing we looked at, which was a 6N Polo, 1.4, 8 valve, right little whip. I wasn't that into it, but it was the first car that we looked at, and I was just excited. I just wanted a car to just mess about with, and my dad quite liked it. I think my dad liked it more than I did, to be fair, but I was well up for it because it was a car. I had some plans for it, wanted to respray it and stuff, lower it, nice wheels, but it would have needed quite a lot of work. It was a bit rusty, and even then, after spending thousands on it, I still wouldn't be that into it because I'm more into my Jap stuff. So I really wanted something Japanese because the Polo just wasn't floating my boat, not my sort of thing really. So I started looking at what I could insure. I was trying to think of weird key cars. Insurance company might not know what it really was. Eventually I found out that you could get the EK Civic with a 1.4 and the EGs with 1.3s, 1.5s, non-VTEC engines, so I thought maybe I could insure one of them. So I narrowed it down. I wanted a Supersonic Blue EJ9, which is a 1.4 litre EK. I wanted a Supersonic Blue facelift. I found one, 44,000 miles on it. It was 10 years old at the time. Rusty arch, because it's a Civic, and bought it anyway for top money, to be honest. 1,700 quid I think it was, back in 2011. The rest is history. I'm like 15 Hondas down, and this is where we're at now. So the car that I'm in now is a Civic Aerodeck VTIS, which is a weird little estate with a 170 horsepower VTEC engine. My next video will focus on that, so I'll kind of gloss over that for now. Got a VW Bora, That's sort of a daily. It's a PD130 Highline, so it's got all the top spec, heated leather, cruise control, aircon, all that stuff. 700 quid 4 years ago. Brilliant little car. Love it. 235,000 miles on it. It did have a clutch last year or the year before, but that's been the biggest expense with it. A really good car, really like it. I like the Mark IV platform, to be honest, and I'd like to try a Leon Cooper R Mark 1 in red, well nice, or a Mark 1 TT, or even a V6 Borer. You know, a lot of options with the Mark IV and some pretty cool stuff. I've also got 2 Accord Type Rs. The first one I got was my second car after I passed my test. Got that aged 18 or 19, I think. 19. That's a 98 S-Reg, one of the very first off the production line. I took the engine out in 2014 to get some welding done. I still haven't got the welding done, so that's a little bit derelict at the minute. It's been off the road for years and years, but it's quite solid for an Accord. They're really known for rotting, and that one is still, even though it did need some welding, it hasn't really got any worse because it's not been near any salt. The other Accord Type R is a 99. It's got about 190,000 miles on it. It's got a hole in the sill and a little hole in the bulkhead, and it probably needs an engine. The crank pulley's wobbling, and even with a brand new pulley on, it still wobbles. So I think the end of the crank is worn, or the thrust washers or crank bearings, or something's knackered on it. Cheapest way to sort that will be to put an engine in it, and it's dead smoky as well. I think the piston rings are well on the way out. It's been to Germany, Nürburgring, 140 down the autobahn. Did 1 lap of the ring, overheated about 3/4 of the way through the lap, but I put it in 5th, and the temperature came back down again, and it drove home fine. It's been fine ever since. And I've also broken 3 Accord Type Rs because they were absolute rot boxes. One of them had been crashed, and the other 2 were just absolutely hanging, rotten as hell, and just not worth saving. But that gave me 3 spare H22 Type R engines. So one of them I put into a 4th gen Prelude, which I bought off eBay for £470. The car's in really nice condition, in a good colour, but I bought it running on 3 cylinders. I think it had dropped a valve. It was all the way in Norwich, so my mate Tom took me in his S2000 to go and get it, and it drove back fine. Stuck it on cruise control, 80 mile an hour, and you wouldn't have known there was an issue. It was dead quiet, no wind noise, no road noise, no rattles from the interior. It was just a really nice 4th gen that had unfortunately had a bit of an engine problem. So that gave me the opportunity to put an Accord Type R engine, box and front brakes in it, and that ended up being one of my favourite cars I've ever had. It was quick, it looked good, drove nicely. The only thing is, it's got the same issue as my Accord, and the crank pulley actually got that bad that it fell off and snapped the alternator belt. That probably wants either a rebuild or another engine putting in before it really goes back on the road. And finally, we've got my EG6, which is a little bit abandoned. I got that age 19, just after the first Accord. I was paying 250 quid a month on insurance because obviously it's a little hot hatch and a young driver. I did 35,000 miles in that in 3 summers. I used it 1 winter. Could you imagine someone doing that in an EG6 today? They're all, they're sort of a bit of a classic car. They all do 1,500 miles a year and never go out in the rain, never go out in the snow or anything like that. But yeah, I did 35k in that in not very long. But then I took it for an MOT 2017, and I think it actually passed, but it had a leaky water pump, so I just parked it up and got a bit distracted with other cars. I had that many other cars to go at the time. I just stuffed it in a corner and left it, and now it's looking pretty shabby. The arches need doing. The paint, it did have a respray before I got it, but not a great one. I do intend on giving that a bit of a full restoration. Glass out, bare shell, really make it nice. It is quite modified. It's got a DC2 subframe steering rack, anti-roll bars, EK9 gearbox, loads of other bits and bobs, but I think body-wise I want it pretty much standard wheels, standard interior, full interior. It's got all the fold flat interior because it's a genuine EG6. It's actually a UK spec, so it's a VTI rather than SIR. Incredibly rare, but it is genuine, so it's worth saving, and I will save it, but just not yet. Everyone's on at me to save it, and I will, but I need a garage first. Back to my first car, I do still have that, the Supersonic Blue facelift, EJ9. That's been off the road now for years and years, unfortunately, so that's looking pretty shabby. I'd love to do a turbo build on that, not sure what engine. I think D16 Z6 or B18 C4 or even a naturally aspirated H22 would be pretty fun. I really want to make that nice again at some point, so you'll see all these sort of restorations and builds on the channel. Once I've got a garage, that's my priority, get a garage built, and then I can do what I want. I've not got to do it on the road outside my house. I would like to try some non-Japanese stuff. As I've already mentioned, the Mark IV platform. There's some pretty cool Mark IV stuff out there, you know, Leons, TTs, V6s, 4Motions, all that kind of stuff. I really would love a Cavalier GSI. From watching the old Super Touring videos from the British touring cars and even Japanese touring cars, there's Cavaliers in that too. I just really want one, think they're dead cool. I do want to import something from Japan. I've spent years looking at threads on the internet where people are eagerly awaiting the car, they're tracking the boat and everything, and it sounds really exciting, so I want a bit of that. Thinking maybe a Legacy or even a K car. I definitely do want to import something. All the cars that I sort of worshipped as a kid off Gran Turismo, they're all stupid money now. Could have got an R32 GTR for 6 or 7 grand 5 years ago, but now they start at high 20s, maybe even 30, and they go up into 6 figures for a really low mileage mint one. So that ship's sailed. I don't think I'll ever get one of them. I'm a big fan of obviously Imprezas, like I mentioned earlier. I'd love a nice early 4-door STI RA, but they're going the same way as the GTRs now with the 25-year rule and everything, so we'll see. I'm also really into my Cold War jets, bit of historic aviation, Vulcans, Victors, Valiants, Lightnings, Phantoms, Tornadoes, all that cool stuff. So you will probably see a little bit of Cold War jet content when we can go to museums and air shows again, if we ever can. And you will definitely notice that I'm not Marty or Moog, I'm not a professional, I'm just sort of winging it. If you've made it this far, thanks very much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, you'll see me again for more. Thank you very much.